A small child was born to a destitute family in the mountains of ancient China. He was frail and sickly because his mother and father could not provide him with the sustenance that he needed to grow in strength. As he grew older, he watched his mother grow sadder and his father grow harsher. He wandered through the streets of his community, seeing nothing but pain and degradation in the eyes of his neighbors. These people were brothers and sisters of suffering. The town was plagued by bandits who would drag the women into the wilderness and beat the men. The townsfolk lived like whipped dogs. All of the spoils of their hard work in the fields went to feed bandit bellies. The women began to cut off their hair and hide their femininity with rags and dirt. The men spent their days in anger, blaming each other for their conditions of suffering. As the small child grew to an adolescent, he grew in anger and resentment. He stared into the mountains with rage in his belly, and that fire burned away any of the meager sustenance that he received from his daily meal. His stomach rolled with hate. Each day he considered arming himself and charging into the mountains to kill as many bandits as he could. But he knew that such an act would lead to his own death, so he continued to carry hate inside until one rainy day when he walked into the center of town and stared more intently into the eyes of his neighbors than he had ever stared before. The suffering that he witnessed was so absurd that he began to laugh. First, quietly to himself, and then a bit louder, and louder still, until his laugh grew to roaring hysterics. His neighbors were confused by his laughter, and after a time they became angry with him. But he just kept laughing. The sight of this young man laughing hysterically in the center of town became so absurd that the hungry children began to laugh, and the saddened women began to laugh, and the angry men began to laugh. Soon the entire town was in an uproar of laughter, and for the first time in Budai's life, he experienced joy in himself and his neighbors. It was after this day that Budai witnessed something magical. The children began to play in the streets. The women began to dress in colorful gowns and show their feminine beauty. The men began to fill their bellies with food saved for the bandits, and they used the energy from this food to build their bodies and repair the defenses of the town. The joy that filled the bellies of the townsfolk, the beautiful fire of the Manipura and love of the heart, rejuvenated the town in a single day. The people became protective of their joy. They finally had something to live for beyond basic survival. With laughter in their bellies and love in their hearts, the townsfolk repelled the bandits and rescued the women from the wilderness. Budai, feeling pleased with himself, grew fat on the abundance of the town, and he decided one day to fill a sack with sweets and wander into the countryside. Budai went from place to place, laughing at starving children and saddened women and angry men, until the entirety of China was filled with laughter and the land was rejuvenated. The bandits were driven away from the land, and the people lived in a loving embrace of all that the world has to offer. So passes the legend of the great Buddha, overman of this age.